The air at Eagles Rest Farmers Market froze as 5 leather-clad men surrounded the pudgy girl arranging tomatoes at her father's stand. Emma Cooper's trembling hands betrayed her fear, but her mother's eyes, remained defiant. Her German shepherd, Max, hackles raised, emitted a low growl that vibrated through the suddenly silent marketplace. Well, sneered the lead biker, his breath reeking of whiskey as he leaned over the wooden table. Looks like we found ourselves the fattest little piggy at the market. His tattooed hand reached for a perfectly arranged heirloom tomato, crushing it deliberately. Red pulp dripped between his fingers onto Emma's carefully written price cards. From across the market, James Cooper's weathered hands paused mid-motion. Though looking like any other overweight, middle-aged farmer in faded overalls, his eyes narrowed microscopically, cataloging every detail. 5 men, positioned in standard flanking formation, the leader's concealed weapon poorly hidden beneath his cut. The same tactical assessment that had kept his Delta Force teams alive through 3 wars now focused on his 12-year-old daughter's safety. The biker had no idea he'd just made the most dangerous mistake of his life. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Emma Cooper had always been the big girl in Eagles Rest, a small Montana town nestled against the mountains where everyone knew everyone's business. At 12 years old, she carried more weight than the other kids her age, a fact that the children at Eagles Rest Middle School never let her forget. Since her mother Catherine's death from breast cancer 3 years ago, food had become Emma's comfort, her silent companion during the long nights when grief kept sleep at bay. Her once vibrant eyes now carried shadows far too old for a child, and the journal hidden beneath her mattress told stories of a pain that went beyond typical adolescent troubles. Some nights, standing before the bathroom mirror, she would pinch her rounded cheeks and whisper her mother's words. "It's not the size of your body that matters, Emmy Bear, but the size of your heart." Those words felt hollow now, especially on days when even breathing felt like an impossible task. James Cooper hadn't always been a farmer. 8 years ago, he'd commanded elite Delta Force teams on missions so classified even the president had limited knowledge of them. His hands, now calloused from tilling soil, had once assembled weapons in complete darkness, taken lives with surgical precision, and carried wounded comrades through hellfire. After 20 years of service, the death of his wife had forced a choice: continue serving his country or serve the daughter who needed him more. The transition to civilian life hadn't been kind to his body. He'd gained nearly 100 pounds, but farming his family's ancestral land offered something operations in foreign territories never could: peace. Most days, anyway. The nightmares still came, and the instincts remained razor-sharp beneath his deliberately slow, friendly demeanor. The locals saw only a widowed farmer who wore his grief in the new lines around his eyes and his expanding waistline. None suspected the lethal training that remained muscle memory. Max wasn't just any German shepherd. 7 years ago, James had found him at a military kennel they scheduled for euthanasia after an IED in Kandahar had damaged his left hind leg and left him too traumatized for further service. Something in the dog's eyes had spoken to James, a warrior recognizing another warrior's pain. The military handlers warned that Max was unpredictable, dangerous even. What they didn't understand was that broken soldiers recognized each other, human or canine. Under James's patient care, Max had transformed, his military training now channeled into one mission: protecting Emma. The bond between the girl and dog transcended ordinary pet relationships. Max slept outside Emma's door every night, sensed her depressive episodes before they overtook her, and positioned himself between her and any perceived threat. For Emma, Max represented unconditional acceptance in a world that had been cruel about her appearance and cold about her grief. Saturday mornings at Eagles Rest Farmers Market had become a ritual for Emma Cooper. Like school, where each hallway felt like a gauntlet of whispers and judgmental eyes, the market offered a kind of acceptance. The regulars knew her as James Cooper's girl, the one with her mother's smile and a way with vegetables. Emma arrived before dawn each Saturday, helping her father load crates of heirloom tomatoes, zucchini, and sweet corn, all grown from seeds her grandmother had preserved for generations. The work was physical, but Emma took pride in it. Her strong arms might be larger than the other girls, but they could carry heavier loads, and her father never failed to notice. "You've got your mother's touch with those tomatoes," James said that morning, watching Emma arrange the ruby-red fruits with careful precision. She always said they needed to be positioned just so to show their best side. Emma smiled, though the mention of her mother still brought an ache. "Do you think she'd be proud of how the garden turned out this year?" "More than proud, Emmy Bear." James squeezed her shoulder gently before returning to unloading the truck. Max, ever vigilant, patrolled the perimeter of their stall, occasionally accepting gentle pats from familiar customers. The dog's military bearing had softened over the years, but his alert posture remained, eyes constantly scanning for threats to his family. Ruth Whitaker, 82 years young and the town's unofficial historian, arrived first, as always, her silver hair neatly pinned beneath a sun hat. "Good morning, Miss Emma," she called, beelining for their stall. "Those tomatoes look particularly fine today. Just like your grandmother used to grow." "Morning, Mrs. Whitaker." Emma handed the elderly woman a paper bag. "I saved you the best ones and some of those purple beans you liked last week." Such a thoughtful girl. Ruth's weathered hand patted Emma's cheek. "How are things at school?" Emma's smile faltered. "Fine." Ruth's kind eyes saw through the lie but didn't press. Instead, she leaned closer, whispering, "Remember what I told you about Eleanor Roosevelt? No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Those children who tease you, they're just showing their own emptiness." Emma nodded gratefully, though the words felt hollow against the memory of yesterday's taunts, earthquake coming Emma's walking to class. The market, at least, offered respite from such cruelty. She was valued for her knowledge of vegetables, her careful arrangements, her quick math when making change. As the morning sun climbed higher, the market filled with weekend shoppers. Emma handled the transactions while her father chatted with other vendors. She kept her stand meticulously organized, finding comfort in the order of things she could control. In her pocket, she carried a smooth worry stone her mother had given her, rubbing it when anxiety tightened her chest. At precisely 10:17 a.m., the first rumble of motorcycles echoed down Main Street. The sound shifted the market's atmosphere. Instantly, conversations hushed, parents pulled children closer, vendors straightened as if preparing for inspection. Emma felt Max press against her leg, his body tense. "They're early today," Ruth muttered, glancing toward the street. 5 motorcycles rounded the corner in perfect formation, chrome gleaming in the morning sun. The riders wore matching leather vests emblazoned with a skull wrapped in storm clouds, the insignia of the Storm Riders. They'd appeared in Eagle's Rest 3 months ago, initially claiming to be just passing through. Now they seemed to be putting down roots, establishing what locals whispered was a chapter on the old Mackenzie property outside town. The leader, a man everyone called Python Kingston, killed his engine directly in front of the market entrance. The 4 others flanked him, creating an intimidating barrier. Python dismounted with the lazy confidence of a man who knew he was feared. His eyes, hidden behind mirrored sunglasses, swept across the market before settling on the vegetable stands. A slow smile spread across his face. "Well, well," he called out, voice carrying across the suddenly quiet market. "Saturday morning in Mayberry. Ain't this just wholesome as apple pie?" Emma felt her father's presence before she saw him, the subtle shift in his stance as he moved closer to her, the almost imperceptible change in his breathing. To anyone else, James Cooper looked like a concerned father, perhaps a bit nervous. Emma knew differently. She recognized the calculating focus that meant her father was mapping escape routes, cataloging potential weapons, assessing threats. Python sauntered between the stalls, running his fingers over fresh produce, occasionally squeezing too hard or knocking items askew. The other bikers spread out, their presence oppressive. A heavyset man with sledge tattooed across his knuckles paused at Mrs. Chin's flower display, deliberately tipping over a bucket of sunflowers. "Oops," he said flatly as Mrs. Chin rushed to salvage her flowers from the puddle spreading across the pavement. Emma watched, her heart pounding, as Python approached their stall. Max's growl deepened, though he stayed obediently by Emma's side. The biker's gaze traveled from the vegetables to Emma, his expression changing as he took in her size. "Well, aren't you a big girl?" Python said, leaning against their table. "Your daddy must spend a fortune feeding you." Emma felt the familiar burn of shame creep up her neck. Her hand found the worry stone in her pocket, squeezing until her knuckles turned white. "Is there something I can help you with?" Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Python's eyebrows rose above his sunglasses. "Got some fight in you, huh? That's surprising. Most fat kids I know are crybabies." He picked up a tomato, tossing it from hand to hand. "How much for this?" $3, Emma replied. Python laughed, the sound harsh in the tense quiet. $3 for a tomato? Highway robbery." He glanced at James, who was helping an elderly customer at the far end of the stall. "Your daddy teach you to rip people off?" "Organic heirlooms," Emma explained, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "We don't use chemicals. That's why they cost more." "Is that right?" Python squeezed the tomato until juice ran down his wrist. "Well, I think I just found a defect. This one's too soft." Max's growl escalated, and Emma placed a steadying hand on his collar. She could feel the dog's muscles bunched, ready to spring. "Max, stay," she commanded softly. Python's attention shifted to the German Shepherd. "That's quite a dog. Looks military grade." His voice held a new edge. "Where'd a fat farmer and his chubby daughter get a dog like that?" "He's a rescue," Emma replied, the half-truth coming easily. Python studied Max with narrowed eyes. "Rescue, huh? Weird, 'cause he stands like the dogs I saw in Afghanistan. Attack dogs, trained to rip a man's throat out." Emma felt rather than saw her father approach. James moved with the deliberate casualness that she recognized as deeply controlled tension. "Morning," James said pleasantly, wiping his hands on a towel. "Can I help you with something?" Python straightened slightly, sizing up James. What he saw apparently reassured him, an overweight, middle-aged farmer in worn overalls, nothing threatening. "Just admiring your daughter's salesmanship," Python said. "And this interesting dog of yours." "Max is protective of Emma," James replied, his tone friendly but firm. "Best not to make sudden moves around him." Python smirked, deliberately dropping the crushed tomato onto their display. "Sounds like a liability in a public place. Shame if something happened and he had to be put down." The threat hung in the air between them. Emma saw something flicker in her father's eyes, a cold calculation that appeared and vanished so quickly most would miss it. $3 for the tomato," James said, his voice unchanged. Python laughed. "For that mush. I did you a favor, farmer." It was overripe. Sledge had made his way to their stall, shoulders bumping roughly against displays as he passed. "Boss, we should move on. Got business to attend to." Python held James's gaze for another long moment before nodding. "Small towns," he said, loud enough for nearby vendors to hear. "Everybody thinks their little garden patch is special. Maybe this market needs to understand how things work when new business comes to town." He reached over suddenly and patted Emma's cheek, his hand lingering uncomfortably. "Nice chatting with you, big girl. Maybe lay off your daddy's produce a bit, huh?" Max lunged forward, barking sharply, stopped only by Emma's firm grip on his collar. Python jumped back, his hand instinctively moving toward his waistband before he caught himself. James stepped forward, placing himself between Python and Emma. "I think you've made your point. Time to move on." Something in James's quiet tone made Python hesitate. For a brief moment, confusion flickered across the biker's face, as though he'd caught a glimpse of something unexpected in the farmer's steady gaze. Then his arrogant mask returned. "Let's go," he called to his men. "This place is boring me anyway." The bikers mounted their motorcycles with theatrical revving of engines, the noise deafening in the confined market space. As they pulled away, Python circled back once, pointing directly at Emma and drawing his finger across his throat in a slashing gesture. James waited until the motorcycles disappeared around the corner before turning to Emma. "Are you okay?" Emma nodded, though her hands still trembled. "I'm fine, just the usual stuff." James's expression softened with recognition. They both knew the usual stuff meant weight-related bullying, something Emma endured regularly at school. But this had been different, more threatening, more deliberate. "Pack up," James said quietly. "We're closing early today." "But we've hardly sold anything," Emma protested. "Some days are like that." James was already collapsing their canopy, his movements efficient. To anyone watching, he might have appeared rattled by the confrontation. Emma saw through it. Her father was planning something. As they loaded the truck, Sheriff Anderson's patrol car pulled into the market parking lot. The sheriff, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and perpetually tired eyes, approached their stall. "Heard we had some excitement," he said, notebook already in hand. "Storm riders causing problems." "Just the usual swagger," James replied, his voice deliberately casual. "Knocked over some displays, damaged a tomato. Nothing serious." The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly. "They threaten you or Emma?" James hesitated just long enough for Emma to notice. "Nothing direct. Just letting everyone know they're here." Sheriff Anderson jotted something in his notebook. "That's the third reported incident this week. They're getting bolder." He lowered his voice. "Between us, Cooper, I'd keep a close eye on Emma. These aren't your typical weekend warrior bikers. They're organized and they're establishing territory." James nodded, patting Max's head. "We've got a good security system." The double meaning wasn't lost on the sheriff, who eyed the German shepherd with newfound appreciation. "Still, be careful. Call if anything happens, anything at all." As the sheriff walked away, Emma noticed her father scanning the market perimeter, his eyes lingering on rooftops and alleyways. She recognized the behavior from rare moments when his guard slipped James Cooper was conducting a threat assessment, just as he'd done countless times in combat zones. "Dad," she said quietly, "are they really dangerous or just jerks?" James finished securing their produce before answering. "Everyone's dangerous if they think they have nothing to lose, Emmy." He pulled her into a brief, tight hug unusual for her typically reserved father. "But nobody's more dangerous than a parent protecting their child. Remember that." The Cooper farmhouse sat on 40 acres at the edge of Eagle's Rest, far enough from town to provide privacy, but close enough for Emma to catch the school bus each morning. It had belonged to James's parents before him, a simple 2-story white clapboard structure with a wraparound porch and sturdy barn. James had modernized the interior after Catherine's death, installing security features that would seem excessive to most: reinforced doors, impact-resistant windows, and surveillance cameras disguised as ordinary fixtures. To visitors, it appeared to be nothing more than sensible precautions for a man and his daughter living in relative isolation. The truth was more complex. After the market incident, James drove home in silence, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel with controlled pressure. Emma recognized the look on her father's face, the slight narrowing of his eyes, the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw. It was the same expression he'd worn when reviewing her hospital discharge papers after her first major depressive episode, a look that said he was formulating a plan. "They're just stupid bikers," Emma finally said as they pulled into their long gravel driveway. "You don't need to worry." James parked the truck and turned to her. "Emmy, what happened today wasn't random. They targeted our stall specifically." "Because we were closest to the entrance," Emma reasoned. James shook his head. "They bypassed 3 other stalls to reach ours. And Python knew things about Max's training, about us." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. "While helping you load the truck, I found this under our table." In his palm lay a tiny black object no larger than a button. "A tracking device," James explained. Military grade, not something you pick up at a spy shop. Emma felt a chill despite the warm day. Why would they bug our stand? That's what I intend to find out. James crushed the device between his fingers. But I need you to be extra careful from now on. No wandering off alone, even with Max. School, home, that's it until I figure this out. Emma nodded, though inside she felt a flicker of resentment. Her world was already small enough: school, where she was tormented, home, where memories of her mother lingered in every corner. The farmer's market had been her one source of interaction with friendly faces. That night, after Emma went to bed, James retreated to his workshop in the barn. Behind a false wall panel lay equipment that would surprise most Eagle's Rest residents: communication devices, specialized tools, and a locked cabinet containing weapons that had never been registered locally. He activated a secure laptop, entering a complex password from memory. The screen illuminated with satellite imagery of Eagle's Rest and the surrounding county. James focused on the old McKenzie property where the Storm Riders had established their compound. Recent imagery showed new structures, increased vehicle traffic, and what appeared to be a recently expanded perimeter fence. This was no ordinary motorcycle club setting up a local chapter. The sophistication of their security and the patterns of delivery vehicles suggested something far more organized. James cross-referenced shipping manifests from local businesses, property records, and police reports, looking for connections. The patterns emerged slowly: increased shipments of fertilizer components that could be used for explosives, deliveries from military surplus companies, and a spike in missing persons reports from neighboring counties. The Storm Riders weren't just marking territory, they were establishing infrastructure for something bigger. His research continued until dawn, when he finally shut down the system and concealed it once more. As he walked back to the house, the weight of his discoveries settled heavily. The Storm Riders were involved in weapons trafficking, using their motorcycle gang as cover for a sophisticated operation. The tracking device at their market stall hadn't been random. They were assessing potential threats, cataloging the local population. And they had taken specific interest in his daughter. Monday morning arrived with dreary skies that matched Emma's mood. The weekend's confrontation had left her anxious, and the thought of facing school filled her with dread. Her father had been distracted at breakfast, his mind clearly elsewhere, though he'd made a point of walking her to the bus stop rather than watching from the porch as usual. Remember, straight home after school, he reminded her as the yellow bus approached. No stops, no detours. Emma nodded, adjusting her backpack on her shoulders. Max whined, sensing her distress at being separated from him. "I'll be fine," she assured both of them, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. The truth was, school had been growing increasingly difficult. The bullying that had once been limited to whispered comments and occasional shoving had escalated in recent weeks. Emma couldn't pinpoint exactly when things had changed, but the timing coincided with the arrival of several new students, all children of Storm Riders members who had recently moved to town. The ringleader was Justin Kingston, Python's 14-year-old son, who had established himself as a dominant force in the 8th grade despite being a recent transfer. Somehow he'd quickly learned about Emma's vulnerabilities: her weight, her mother's death, her occasional panic attacks, and weaponized each one. The bus ride passed in tense silence, Emma hunched in a seat near the driver, her eyes fixed on her worn sneakers. She could feel stares from the back of the bus where Justin and his friends had claimed territory. The whispers reached her anyway: earthquake alert and better reinforce the bus seats. Emma clutched her backpack tighter, focusing on her breathing techniques. 4 counts in, hold for 7, 8 counts out. Her therapist had taught her this after her first panic attack, and explaining how controlled breathing could help manage the overwhelming feelings that sometimes threatened to drown her. The school day unfolded with the expected torments. A cruel note taped to her locker, exaggerated groans when she sat at her assigned desk, whispers and laughter when she answered questions in class. Emma had developed strategies for each, keeping her eyes forward, focusing on her schoolwork, retreating to the library during lunch. But today, something felt different. The harassment seemed more coordinated, more purposeful. And things escalated in the hallway between classes. Emma was retrieving books from her locker when Justin Kingston and 3 friends surrounded her. "Hey, wide load," Justin taunted, deliberately knocking his shoulder against hers. "My dad saw you at the market Saturday. Said you've got a killer dog. Probably trained him to find food for you, huh?" Emma kept her head down, trying to close her locker, but one of Justin's friends slammed it shut, nearly catching her fingers. "I'm talking to you, fatso," Justin persisted, moving closer. "What's the matter? Can't hear me over your stomach growling." "Leave me alone," Emma muttered, trying to step around them. Justin blocked her path. "My dad says your dad acted real strange Saturday. Like maybe he's hiding something." His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "Are you hiding something, Emma? Does your fat daddy have secrets?" The question sent a chill through Emma. There was something calculated in Justin's eyes, something beyond typical bullying. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if he knew about her father's military background, about the contents of the hidden room in their barn. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, pushing past him with more force than she intended. Justin stumbled back, surprise flashing across his face before morphing into rage. "You'll regret that, cow," he hissed. "Nobody pushes me." Emma hurried to her next class, her heart hammering. For the first time, she felt that the bullying wasn't just about her weight or social status. It felt personal, targeted, as if she were being probed for information. The day deteriorated further. In gym class, someone had written "oink, oink" on her locker in permanent marker. At lunch, she discovered her sandwich had been crushed in her backpack, the contents smeared across her history textbook. By final period, Emma felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the tunneling of her vision that preceded a panic attack. She barely made it through the final bell, rushing to the empty girls' bathroom in the science wing. Locking herself in a stall, Emma finally let the tears come, silent sobs shaking her body as she gasped for breath. The panic attack rolled over her in waves, each one leaving her more drained than the last. When the building had quieted, Emma finally emerged from the bathroom, eyes red-rimmed and puffy. The hallways were deserted. She'd missed the bus. Pulling out her phone to call her father, she found the battery dead, another of the day's cruelties orchestrated by Justin and his friends. Emma stood in the empty corridor, a wave of hopelessness washing over her. The 3-mile walk home stretched before her like an impossible journey. In that moment of absolute desolation, a dark thought surfaced, one that had visited her during previous episodes of depression. If she simply ceased to exist, the pain would end. No more taunts about her weight, no more pitying looks from teachers, no more being a burden to her grieving father. She found herself walking not toward the school exit, but up the stairs to the 3rd floor, then to the maintenance door leading to the roof. The door was supposed to be locked, but the baseball team often propped it open for smoking breaks. Today was no exception. Emma stepped onto the flat gravel roof, the afternoon sun momentarily blinding her. The edge was only 20 feet away, the parking lot concrete 3 stories below. Emma moved as if in a trance, tears streaming unchecked down her face. All she could hear were the echoing taunts. All she could feel was the crushing weight of her existence. She was 2 steps from the edge when a familiar bark shattered her dissociative state. Turning in disbelief, Emma saw Max charging across the rooftop, moving with the speed and determination that belied his old injury. Behind him, her father emerged from the roof access door, his face ashen. Max reached her first, bodily inserting himself between Emma and the roof's edge, whining anxiously as he pressed against her legs. The physical contact, the warm, solid presence of the dog who had never judged her, never found her wanting, broke through Emma's despair. She crumpled to her knees, arms encircling Max's thick neck as sobs racked her body. James reached them seconds later, dropping to the gravel beside them. His strong arms wrapped around both Emma and Max, creating a protective circle. "Emmy," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm here. I've got you." "How did you find me?" Emma managed between sobs. James pulled back slightly, his eyes red-rimmed. "Max, when you didn't come home, I brought him to track you. He led us straight here." He cupped her face in his calloused hands. "Emma, please don't ever. I can't lose you too." The naked fear in her father's voice, the uncharacteristic tremor in his hands, these penetrated Emma's despair more effectively than any words could have. This man who had faced combat, who had seen the worst humanity could offer, was terrified at the thought of losing her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It was just too much today." James helped her to her feet, keeping a supportive arm around her shoulders. "Let's go home, Emmy Bear. Whatever's happening, we'll face it together." As they made their way down from the roof, Emma noticed her father exchange a significant look with someone in the school parking lot. Sheriff Anderson was leaning against his patrol car with a grave expression. The sheriff nodded once, a gesture that seemed loaded with meaning. Later that evening, after Emma had been settled with hot chocolate and Max lying protectively across her feet, James sat across from Sheriff Anderson at their kitchen table. The sheriff's official notebook lay open, but he wasn't writing. Instead, he studied James with newfound respect. "You want to tell me how your dog knew exactly where to find your daughter?" Anderson asked quietly. "Or how you got from your farm to the school in under 10 minutes when it's a 20-minute drive?" James met his gaze steadily. "I'm a concerned father who knows his daughter has been bullied. I keep tabs on her." "Cut the bull, Cooper." Anderson leaned forward. "I ran your name through the system after today. 20 years service record, most of it redacted. Your dog has a military service number. And you just happened to move to Eagle's Rest right when your service ended." He tapped his notebook. "I'm not your enemy here, but I need to know what I'm dealing with if these storm riders are targeting your family specifically." James was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. "Delta Force, retired honorably after my wife's diagnosis. Max was my unit's explosives detection K-9 until an IED in Afghanistan injured him. We came here for a fresh start, nothing more." "And the storm riders? Any history there?" "None," James replied, "but they're not what they seem. They're organized, well-funded, and they've taken a specific interest in my property and my daughter." Anderson nodded slowly. "I've noticed their operation seems professional for a bunch of bikers. Too much money, too many connections too quickly." He closed his notebook. "I'm short-staffed, Cooper. County budget cuts mean I've got 3 deputies covering 100 square miles. If something's brewing with these storm riders, I could use someone with your background." "I'm a farmer now," James said carefully. "A father. You're also the best chance this town has if my suspicions about these bikers are correct." Anderson stood to leave. "Think about it. In the meantime, keep your daughter close and your eyes open." As the sheriff's car disappeared down the driveway, James returned to find Emma asleep on the couch, one hand buried in Max's fur. The sight solidified his resolve. Whatever the storm riders were planning, whatever threat they posed to Eagle's Rest and to his daughter, James Cooper would not be caught unprepared again. His days of combat might be behind him, but the instincts, the training, the strategic mind that had made him a legendary Delta Force commander, those remained razor sharp. And nothing in the world was more dangerous than a father protecting his child. The morning after Emma's rooftop incident, James made a decision. He called the school and informed them Emma would be absent for the remainder of the week, citing a family emergency. The secretary's voice had carried a note of understanding that suggested news of the incident had already circulated through the small town's grapevine. In reality, James needed time to secure their situation and ensure Emma's safety before allowing her back into an environment that had driven her to the brink. Emma sat at the kitchen table that morning, listlessly pushing cereal around her bowl, Max's head resting protectively on her lap. The German Shepherd hadn't left her side since the previous day, as if understanding the magnitude of what had nearly happened. "Am I in trouble?" Emma finally asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. James looked up from the paperwork he'd been reviewing. For what happened yesterday, he shook his head firmly. No, Emmy, never for that. But I need you to promise me something. He reached across the table, taking her hand. If those feelings come back, the ones that make you think about hurting yourself, you'll tell me immediately. No matter what time, no matter what I'm doing. Promise me. Emma nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I promise. Good. James squeezed her hand before releasing it. Now, I've got some errands to run in town. You're staying here with Max. Doors locked, security system on. If anyone comes to the door, anyone at all, you call me immediately. After James left, Emma retreated to her bedroom, Max following dutifully. She pulled out her journal, flipping past pages filled with dark thoughts and self-recrimination to a fresh sheet. Something about yesterday's confrontation with Justin Kingston kept nagging at her. His questions hadn't been typical bullying, they'd been probing, almost adult in their calculation. Does your fat daddy have secrets? The question felt rehearsed, as if someone else had put the words in Justin's mouth. Around noon, a knock at the door startled Emma from her thoughts. Max immediately tensed, moving to stand between Emma and the bedroom door, his hackles raised. Emma's heart hammered as she crept to her window, peering cautiously through the curtains. On the porch stood Ms. Martinez, her math teacher, holding what appeared to be a folder of papers. Emma hesitated, her father's warning echoing in her mind. But Ms. Martinez had always been kind, one of the few teachers who consistently intervened when bullying occurred in her presence. Taking out her phone, Emma called her father. Ms. Martinez is here, she said when he answered. She has some papers. There was a pause on the line. Stay inside, James instructed. Tell her through the door that you're not feeling well and she can leave the papers in the mailbox. Do not open the door, Emmy. Something in her father's tone made Emma comply without argument. After Ms. Martinez left, placing the folder in their mailbox as suggested, Emma watched her drive away. The teacher had seemed disappointed but not surprised by the rebuff. When James returned home an hour later, he retrieved the folder before entering the house. Emma watched as he carefully examined the contents, homework assignments, and a note expressing concern for Emma's well-being. Why didn't you want me to let her in? Emma asked. Ms. Martinez is nice. She stops Justin when he's mean to me. James considered his response carefully. I'm being cautious right now, that's all. Until we know more about what's happening with the Storm Riders, we need to be careful about who we trust. What James didn't share with Emma was what he'd discovered during his errands that day. Using contacts from his military days, he'd run background checks on Eagles Rest's newest residents, including the town's recently hired teachers. Most had come back clean, but Elena Martinez's history contained irregularities, gaps in her employment record, addresses that led to government buildings, and a curious overlap with federal investigations into weapons trafficking in 3 different states. Nothing conclusive, but enough to raise red flags for someone with James's training. While Emma worked on her assignments that afternoon, James established subtle surveillance around their property, wildlife cameras positioned at strategic points, motion sensors disguised as garden decorations, tripwires concealed along likely approach routes. To a trained eye, these measures might be detectable, but to casual observers, they would appear to be nothing more than standard farm security. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, James drove into town. The Rusty Nail was Eagles Rest's only bar, a weathered establishment that had served local farmers and ranchers for generations. Recently, it had acquired new regular Storm Riders who claimed a corner section most evenings. James entered casually, dressed in his usual worn jeans and flannel, nothing that would suggest he was anything other than a local farmer stopping in for a beer. He took a seat at the bar, nodding to familiar faces while keeping the bikers in his peripheral vision. Python Kingston sat at the center of the group, holding court like a king among his subjects. The conversation was animated, with occasional bursts of laughter that carried a threatening edge. Evening, Cooper, the bartender, Mike Davidson, greeted him. Unusual to see you in here on a weeknight. Everything okay out at your place? Just needed to get out of the house for a bit, James replied, accepting the beer Mike placed before him. Been a rough few days. Mike's expression softened. Heard about Emma. Kids can be cruel. How's she holding up? She's tough, James said, the pride in his voice genuine. Tougher than she knows. As they spoke, James noticed Python watching him with poorly concealed interest. The biker leader whispered something to Sledge, who nodded and made his way to the bar, positioning himself 2 stools away from James. Farmer Cooper, Sledge acknowledged, his tone mockingly respectful. Heard your daughter had some trouble at school yesterday. Rooftop tour went bad, I hear. James took a slow sip of his beer, controlling the surge of protective rage. You seem well informed about a miner's private struggles. Sledge shrugged massive shoulders. Small town. People talk. People should be careful what they talk about, James replied evenly. Especially when it involves children. Just making conversation, Sledge said, raising his hands in mock surrender. Python thought you might be upset about our little chat at the market. I want you to know there's no hard feelings. James turned slightly to face the biker directly. Is that right? Tell Python if he or any of his people go near my daughter again at school, at the market, anywhere, there will absolutely be hard feelings. Sledge's eyes narrowed at the calm delivery of what was clearly a threat. For a moment the facade of civility cracked, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. This wasn't just a biker enforcer, this was someone with training, someone who recognized a genuine threat when he heard one. Message received, Sledge said finally, his tone no longer mocking. But you might want to consider something, Cooper. Eagle's Rest is changing. New businesses, new opportunities. Smart folks are getting on board early. He leaned slightly closer. Python likes your land, good access roads, isolated, lots of storage space. He's prepared to make a generous offer. Very generous. The pieces clicked into place for James. The Storm Riders weren't just establishing territory, they wanted his farm specifically. Its strategic location, its multiple outbuildings, its relative isolation from neighbors would make it an ideal distribution hub for weapons trafficking. Not interested, James replied simply. Family land, not for sale at any price. Sledge nodded as if he'd expected this answer. Think about your daughter, Cooper. After what happened yesterday, might be she needs a fresh start somewhere else. Python can make that possible enough money to relocate anywhere you want, give the girl a new beginning. The implied threat was clear. Take the offer or Emma's life in Eagle's Rest would become unbearable. James finished his beer in one long swallow, set the glass down carefully, and stood. My farm is not for sale, he said, each word precisely delivered. My daughter and I are not going anywhere. Make sure Python understands that. He left the bar without looking back, though he could feel eyes tracking his departure. Once in his truck, James removed a small device from his pocket, a passive recording system that had captured every word of his conversation with Sledge. One piece of evidence secured. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The following days established a new routine for the Cooper household. James kept Emma home from school, arranging for assignments to be delivered by Sheriff Anderson rather than left to the school's discretion. He intensified her training with Max, reinforcing commands that would keep both of them safe in various scenarios. To Emma's surprise, her father also began teaching her self-defense techniques, simple but effective moves designed to create distance from an attacker and allow for escape. I can't always be with you, James explained as he showed her how to break a wrist grab. I need to know you can protect yourself if necessary. Emma took to the training with unexpected enthusiasm. The physical activity gave her a sense of agency she'd been missing, and the focused attention from her father provided reassurance that she wasn't alone in facing whatever was coming. During this time, James methodically gathered intelligence on the Storm Riders' operation. Using his military contacts and carefully established surveillance, he built a comprehensive picture of their infrastructure, supply routes, distribution methods, key personnel. The operation was more sophisticated than he'd initially suspected, with connections to larger criminal networks and evidence of protection from someone with significant influence. 1 week after the market confrontation, Emma was restless from confinement. "Dad, I can't stay locked up forever," she argued over breakfast. "I'm missing too much school, and the longer I stay away, the worse it'll be when I go back." James recognized the truth in her words. Isolating Emma might protect her physically, but it was damaging her emotionally and socially. After careful consideration, he agreed she could return to school the following Monday with certain precautions in place. "You'll take Max with you," he insisted, overriding her initial protests. "I've already cleared it with Principal Dawson as a therapy dog accommodation due to your anxiety. He'll have official documentation and everything." Emma's eyes widened. "They'll let Max come to school with me." "Sheriff Anderson helped persuade them," James explained. "After what happened on the roof, the school is eager to demonstrate they're taking your well-being seriously." He didn't add that Anderson had implied potential liability issues if they refused reasonable accommodation for a student who had attempted self-harm on school property. Monday morning arrived with a mix of dread and determination for Emma. She dressed carefully in her most comfortable clothes, a shield of fabric against the inevitable stares and whispers. Max wore a new vest identifying him as a service animal, his demeanor shifting noticeably when James placed it on him head high, movements precise at every inch, the professional working dog. "Remember," James said as he drove them to school rather than having Emma take the bus, "Max stays with you at all times. If anyone gives you trouble, anyone at all, you use the code word we discussed and Max will alert. And if things get really bad, you call me immediately." "I know, Dad," Emma replied, nervously stroking Max's fur. "We've been over it 1,000,000 times." The school parking lot was already full when they arrived. James walked Emma to the main entrance, Max heeling perfectly beside her. Students stopped and stared, conversations halting mid-sentence at the sight of the imposing German Shepherd accompanying the school's favorite bullying target. Principal Dawson met them at the door, his expression a careful mix of professional concern and wariness as he eyed Max. "M.S. Cooper, welcome back," he greeted Emma. "I trust you're feeling better?" "Yes, sir," Emma replied quietly. "And this must be Max, correct?" The principal kept a measured distance from the dog. "I've reviewed the documentation Sheriff Anderson provided. While this is highly unusual, we're committed to providing appropriate accommodations for your condition." He handed Emma a laminated card. "This indicates official approval for your service animal. Please show it to any teacher or staff member who inquires." As James prepared to leave, he noticed Ms. Martinez watching from the hallway, her expression unreadable. Their eyes met briefly before she turned away, disappearing into the stream of students heading to first period. "I'll pick you up at exactly 3:15, James told Emma. "Wait for me right here, inside the doors. Don't leave with anyone else, not even a teacher or the sheriff, unless they use our family password. Understood?" Emma nodded, squaring her shoulders. With Max at her side, she entered the school, head held high, despite the whispers that followed her progress. The day proved to be a study in contrasts. Some students maintained their distance, intimidated by Max's presence. Others, previously neutral in the social hierarchy, approached Emma with cautious friendliness, drawn by curiosity about her canine companion. Teachers reacted with varying degrees of acceptance, from Ms. Martinez's apparent approval to Mr. Hoffman's barely concealed annoyance at having a dog in his science class. Justin Kingston and his friends remained conspicuously absent until lunch period, when they entered the cafeteria en masse, scanning the room until they spotted Emma. Justin started toward her table, his usual smirk in place, but faltered when Max raised his head, dark eyes fixing on the approaching threat. "Control your mutt, fatso," Justin called from a safe distance. "Or animal control might have to pay a visit." Emma felt the familiar burn of humiliation, but it was tempered by Max's solid presence against her leg. "He's a service animal," she replied, loud enough for supervising teachers to hear. "Legally protected. Maybe you should read something besides comic books, Justin." A ripple of surprised laughter spread through nearby tables. Justin's face darkened with anger at the unexpected pushback. Before he could respond, Ms. Martinez appeared beside him. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Kingston?" she asked, her tone pleasant but firm. "She brought a dangerous dog to school," Justin complained. "It tried to attack me." "Actually," Ms. Martinez replied, "I've been observing from across the room." Max hasn't moved from Emma's side, while you approached their table with what appeared to be hostile intent. She smiled thinly. "Perhaps you should find another seat for today." As Justin and his friends retreated, Emma looked up at her math teacher with newfound appreciation. "Thank you, Ms. Martinez." "You're welcome, Emma." The teacher's expression softened. "I'm glad to see you back at school. And I'm especially glad to see you've got such good protection now." Something in the way she emphasized the word protection caught Emma's attention, but before she could analyze it, Ms. Martinez continued, "If you need help catching up on the work you missed, I'm available after school most days." The rest of the day passed without major incident, though Emma remained on alert, hyper-aware of her surroundings in a way that reminded her of her father. By final period, she was exhausted from the constant vigilance, and even Max showed signs of fatigue, his usual military bearing slightly relaxed as he lay at her feet during history class. As the final bell rang, Emma gathered her things and headed for the main entrance as instructed. She was halfway down the science wing when she heard voices from a rarely used classroom, one voice in particular standing out. Justin Kingston, his tone unusually respectful as he spoke to someone Emma couldn't see. "Told me to find out whatever I could about Cooper and his kid," Justin was saying. "The old man doesn't seem worried about our normal intimidation tactics." "That's because he's not who he appears to be," replied a second voice, adult, male, and unfamiliar to Emma. "Keep pushing the girl. Sooner or later she'll crack and we'll get what we need." "She brought a military dog to school today," Justin reported. "German Shepherd with some kind of service vest." A pause. "Interesting. Take a picture next time you see it. I want to run it through our database." Emma backed away carefully, but Max's nails clicked against the linoleum floor, the sound seemingly amplified in the empty hallway. The conversation inside the classroom ceased abruptly. "Someone's there," the adult voice hissed. Emma didn't wait to be discovered. She turned and ran, Max keeping pace beside her as they raced through the empty corridors toward the main entrance. Behind them, she heard a door slam open and footsteps giving pursuit. They burst through the front doors just as James's truck pulled up to the curb. Emma yanked open the passenger door, allowing Max to leap in before scrambling in herself. "Drive," she gasped. "Someone's following us." James didn't question her urgency. He pulled away from the curb smoothly but quickly, his eyes checking the rearview mirror. "What happened?" "I overheard Justin talking to someone," Emma explained between ragged breaths. "An adult I didn't recognize. They were talking about you, about finding out who you really are. And they mentioned Max. They want to run him through their database, whatever that means." James's expression darkened. "Did you see who Justin was talking to?" Emma shook her head. "No, but they heard us and started chasing us." She twisted in her seat to look back at the school. "Dad, I don't think this is just about buying our farm anymore. They know something about you, about who you used to be." "It was always a possibility," James acknowledged, his voice calm despite the tension evident in his grip on the steering wheel. "Military records can be sealed, but people talk. Connections can be traced." "What do we do now?" James checked the mirrors again, confirming they weren't being followed. "Now we accelerate our timeline. I've gathered enough intelligence to act, and this confirms they're getting too close." "Act how?" Emma asked, suddenly fearful of the determined gleam in her father's eyes. "To protect you and to protect this town," James replied. "The Storm Riders aren't just criminals, Emmy. Based on what I've discovered, they're setting up Eagle's Rest as a major distribution hub for illegal weapons, military-grade hardware that could devastate communities across the country. As they turned onto the dirt road leading to their farm, James made a decision. It's time to bring you fully into the loop. You're old enough to understand what we're facing, and after today, keeping you in the dark puts you in more danger, not less. That evening, for the first time since her mother's death, James opened up to Emma about his military career, the specialized training, the covert operations, the reasons he'd chosen a quiet farming life after Catherine's diagnosis. He explained his suspicions about the storm riders in detail, showing her the evidence he'd gathered of weapons shipments, money laundering through local businesses, and strategic infiltration of the town's infrastructure. "Why don't you just tell Sheriff Anderson everything?" Emma asked. "Let him handle it." "Anderson's a good man, but he's outgunned and undermanned," James explained. "More importantly, I believe someone with authority is protecting the Storm Riders operation. Until I know who that is, involving official channels could tip our hand." Emma absorbed this information, her perception of her quiet, overweight father shifting dramatically. The man before her was not just a farmer who had let himself go after his wife's death. He was a skilled operator playing a long game, using his unassuming appearance as cover while he gathered intelligence. "So what's the plan?" she asked finally. James smiled slightly, recognizing the Cooper determination in his daughter's question. "First, we secure our position. Then we gather more concrete evidence. And finally, we disrupt their operation at the most vulnerable point in their supply chain." "And where is that?" "Based on shipping manifests and surveillance, they're expecting a major weapons delivery 3 days from now. That's our window." James's expression turned serious. "But Emma, this will be dangerous. I need you to understand that once we commit to this course of action, there's no going back. These people won't hesitate to eliminate anyone they perceive as a threat." Emma thought about Justin's calculated bullying, about the rooftop where she'd nearly made an irreversible decision, about the nameless man who had ordered a child to gather intelligence on her family. Her fear was real, but so was her growing anger at those who had turned her life and her town upside down. "I understand," she said firmly. "What do you need me to do?" The morning after James revealed the full scope of the Storm Riders operation to Emma, a dense fog settled over Eagle's Rest, shrouding the town in ghostly white. Emma stood at her bedroom window watching tendrils of mist curl around the barn and disappear into the surrounding fields. The obscured landscape seemed an apt metaphor for her new reality, familiar shapes transformed into something mysterious and potentially threatening. 3 days until the weapons shipment. 3 days to gather the final evidence they needed. 3 days that could change everything for their family and for Eagle's Rest. "Ready for this?" James asked from her doorway, already dressed in his farmer's attire, worn overalls over a faded flannel shirt, work boots caked with mud from yesterday's rain. Emma nodded, though her stomach churned with anxiety. Today's mission seemed simple enough on the surface. She would return to school with Max as usual, maintaining her routine while being more observant of Justin Kingston and his associates. Meanwhile, James would visit Ruth Whitaker, ostensibly to thank her for her support at the farmer's market, but actually to probe for information about the town's oldest resident might have noticed regarding the Storm Riders' activities. But remember, James cautioned as he drove Emma to school, observation only today. No confrontations, no investigations. If Justin or anyone else approaches you, standard responses only, nothing that reveals what we know, Emma finished. "Dad, we went over this 3 times at breakfast." James smiled slightly. "That's my girl. Operational security is." "The difference between success and failure," Emma completed again, rolling her eyes but returning his smile. At school, Emma maintained her heightened awareness throughout the morning. She noticed details she might have overlooked before. Justin Kingston receiving texts during class that made him visibly tense. Ms. Martinez watching certain students with particular attention. New security cameras installed at key points throughout the building. Max remained vigilant beside her, his military training evident in the way he positioned himself in each classroom, always facing the door, always maintaining sightlines to all approaches. During lunch period, Emma made a calculated decision to sit at a table near the cafeteria's east exit, which offered a clear view of the parking lot. As she had suspected, Justin and 3 other students, all children of Storm Riders members, left the building halfway through lunch, crossing to the far side of the lot where they met briefly with a man in a delivery uniform. The exchange was quick, almost imperceptible if you weren't looking for it, but Emma's newly trained eye caught the small package that changed hands. She discreetly took a photo with her phone, angling it to appear as though she was checking social media. Max, sensing her tension, shifted slightly but maintained his relaxed posture as instructed. Interesting lunch break activity, isn't it? Emma startled at the voice beside her. Ms. Martinez had approached silently, her own lunch tray in hand. "Mind if I join you?" the teacher asked, already sliding into the seat across from Emma. "Of course not," Emma replied, quickly locking her phone screen. Ms. Martinez glanced at Max, who had raised his head to study her intently. "He's quite extraordinary," she commented. "German shepherds, with his level of training, are rare in civilian settings." Something in the teacher's phrasing raised a flag in Emma's mind. Not his level of obedience or his good behavior, specifically his level of training. "He's been a great help with my anxiety," Emma said carefully, sticking to their established cover story. Ms. Martinez nodded, taking a bite of her salad before responding. "Anxiety can be debilitating. I've seen many students struggle with it, though few receive such specialized support." She met Emma's eyes directly. "Your father must have excellent connections to secure a service animal with Max's capabilities." The comment hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken questions. Emma maintained her neutral expression, remembering her father's warnings about revealing too much. "We got lucky," she replied simply. Ms. Martinez's lips curved in what might have been amusement. "Indeed, luck plays such an interesting role in our lives." She glanced toward the parking lot where Justin and his friends were returning to the building. "Though I've found that preparation often matters more than luck." Before Emma could formulate a response, the teacher rose smoothly. "Enjoy the rest of your lunch, Emma. And do be careful on your way home today. I hear there's more fog expected this afternoon." The interaction left Emma unsettled. Ms. Martinez seemed to be speaking in coded phrases, almost as if she were attempting to communicate something beyond her actual words. But whether she was offering a warning or a threat remained unclear. Meanwhile, across town, James Cooper sat in Ruth Whitaker's meticulously maintained living room, balancing a delicate teacup on his knee as the elderly woman recounted town history. Ruth had lived in Eagles Rest for all of her 82 years, and little occurred in the community without her knowledge. "It's shameful how those motorcyclists treated Emma at the market," Ruth said, passing James a plate of homemade cookies. "In my day, men knew better than to intimidate a child." "That's actually why I wanted to stop by," James replied. "To thank you for standing up for Emma that day. She thinks the world of you." Ruth waved away his gratitude. "Nonsense. Anyone would have done the same." She peered at him over her glasses. "Though I must say, James, your response surprised me a bit." "How so?" "You were so controlled. Most fathers would have shown more anger when their child was threatened." She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Reminded me of my late husband, actually. He was military too, you know, Korean War. Had that same stillness about him when trouble came calling, like the calm before a storm." James kept his expression neutral, though inwardly he noted this confirmation that his background wasn't as concealed as he'd hoped. "I've found that losing my temper rarely helps a situation," he said carefully. "Very wise," Ruth agreed. "Though I wonder if our new residents understand what's really happening in this town. They seem to think Eagles Rest is easily intimidated." She set her teacup down with a decisive click. "Did you know I was mayor here for nearly 20 years? From 1978 to 1997. Oversaw quite a transformation. James allowed her to redirect the conversation, recognizing that Ruth was building towards something in her own way. "This isn't the first time outsiders have tried to use our town for their purposes," she continued, her voice hardening slightly. "In the mid-'80s, we had another group called themselves business investors. Wanted to build a shipping center on the old McKenzie property, same place these storm riders have taken over." "What happened?" James asked, genuinely curious. "Turned out their shipping center was actually planned as a distribution hub for narcotics." Ruth's eyes gleamed with remembered triumph. "We shut that down rather definitively." "Through legal channels?" Ruth laughed, a surprisingly girlish sound from the elderly woman. "Let's just say Eagle's Rest protects its own, James. By whatever means necessary." She leaned forward suddenly, her expression turning serious. "These storm riders are worse than those drug runners. They're bringing in more than just motorcycles and bad attitudes." James set his teacup aside, giving Ruth his full attention. "What have you seen, Mrs. Whitaker?" "Late-night deliveries, unmarked trucks, men with military posture who are certainly not typical bikers." Ruth's voice dropped to a near whisper. "And last week I saw something that truly concerned me. Your Emma's teacher, M.S. Martinez, meeting with a man behind the old gristmill. Certainly not a romantic rendezvous as they exchanged documents, spoke briefly, then left separately." "Did you recognize the man?" Ruth shook her head. "Not a local, but he had the bearing of authority government, perhaps, or high-level corporate." She studied James for a long moment. "I'm telling you this, Mr. Cooper, because I recognize what you're doing. You're gathering intelligence, assessing threats, preparing to protect what's yours. Just like my William would have done." The directness of her statement caught James off guard. Ruth smiled at his surprise. "I may be old, but I'm not blind or foolish. You're no simple farmer, just as those aren't simple bikers." She reached for her teapot. "More tea?" As James drove home from Ruth's house, his mind worked through this new information. M.S. Martinez was involved somehow, either with the storm riders or with some other entity investigating them. The weapons shipment expected in 3 days was likely even more significant than he'd initially believed. And Ruth Whitaker was far more perceptive and potentially useful than he'd given her credit for. He was so deep in thought that he nearly missed the black SUV parked half-hidden at the turn to his driveway. James slowed his truck, seemingly adjusting the radio while actually activating the small camera concealed in his side mirror. The vehicle was unoccupied, but its position provided a clear view of anyone entering or leaving the Cooper farm. Rather than continuing home, James drove past his own driveway, circling around to approach his property from the rarely used back access road. He parked behind the barn and entered through a concealed door, quickly moving to the surveillance system he'd established. The cameras showed 2 men in tactical clothing making a systematic sweep of the house, their movements betraying professional training. Not storm riders, these were operators, men with military or law enforcement backgrounds. James watched as they photographed documents on his desk, placed small devices in strategic locations throughout the house, and methodically searched for hidden compartments or safes. His first thought was for Emma, still at school. James checked his watch 2 hours until dismissal, enough time to deal with the intruders and secure the house before retrieving her. He sent a quick text message to the secure phone he'd given Emma, code yellow. "Wait for me inside school building after final bell. Do not approach any vehicles, even mine, without password verification." Then he began to prepare. At school, Emma's phone vibrated with her father's message during final period. Code yellow, potential security compromise. Her heart rate accelerated, but she kept her expression neutral as MS. Martinez continued her lecture on algebraic equations. Max sensed her tension, pressing closer to her leg under the desk. When the final bell rang, Emma remained in her seat, waiting for the classroom to clear before approaching MS. Martinez's desk. "I need to stay here until my dad comes," she explained, showing the teacher her father's text. "Family rule." MS. Martinez studied the message, Then Emma's face, her expression unreadable. "Of course, I have some grading to do anyway. You're welcome to wait here." Emma sent a simple acknowledgement to her father, then settled at a desk near the door with Max beside her. Ms. Martinez worked quietly at her computer, occasionally glancing at Emma with what might have been concern or calculation. After 20 minutes of uncomfortable silence, Emma's phone chimed with another message, all clear. "Coming now. Password Catherine's Garden." Relief washed through her. The reference to her mother's beloved garden plot behind their house confirmed the message truly came from her father. Still, when James arrived 15 minutes later, Emma verified the password again before leaving with him. "Everything okay?" she asked as they walked to his truck, Max alert between them. "We had visitors," James replied quietly. "Professional search team. They're secured now." Emma's eyes widened at the implication. "Secured?" "Temporarily detained and awaiting Sheriff Anderson's arrival," James clarified. "They'll be questioned officially." As they drove home, James explained what had occurred. After observing the intruders, he had used non-lethal tactics to subdue them, binding them securely in the barn before contacting Sheriff Anderson directly. "They're not storm riders," James explained. "Their equipment and training suggest federal involvement of some kind, but they weren't carrying identification. Anderson is running their fingerprints now." "What were they looking for?" Emma asked. "Information about us specifically, confirmation of my military background and current activities. They planted surveillance devices throughout the house and copied files from my desk." James's expression remained calm, but Emma could see tension in the set of his shoulders. "This accelerates our timeline. The weapons shipment is clearly more significant than I initially believed, and multiple groups are now interested in it." When they arrived home, Sheriff Anderson's vehicle was parked beside the barn. The sheriff himself stood watching as 2 deputies escorted the handcuffed intruders to a police SUV. "Interesting afternoon you've had, Cooper," Anderson commented as James and Emma approached. "These gentlemen refused to identify themselves or explain why they were conducting an illegal search of your property." "Any leads?" James asked. Anderson shook his head. "Nothing concrete yet. Their fingerprints aren't in the system, which itself tells us something. No legitimate federal agents would have scrubbed prints." He lowered his voice. "We need to talk privately." Once Emma was settled in the house with Max, James and Anderson conferred on the porch, speaking quietly to avoid any surveillance devices that might remain active despite James's sweep. "I've been contacted by the ATF," Anderson revealed. "They've had the storm riders under investigation for months as part of a larger weapons trafficking operation. What I wasn't told until an hour ago is that they have an undercover operative in town." "Martinez," James surmised. Anderson nodded. "Elena Martinez, ATF special agent. She's been embedded at the school specifically to monitor the children of known Storm Riders members, gathering intelligence on the organization's communication schedule." "Does she know about me?" James asked. "That's where things get complicated," Anderson replied. "When I mentioned you were ex-military and had subdued 2 professional operators, her supervisor became very interested. They want to meet." James considered this development. The weapons shipment is coming in 3 days. Whatever they're planning, it's significant enough to warrant multiple levels of surveillance and infiltration. "That's the other thing," Anderson said grimly. "Based on intel Martinez has gathered, the shipment timeline has been accelerated. It's arriving tomorrow night." Back inside the house, Emma watched through the window as her father and the sheriff spoke. The day's events had shaken her, but also crystallized her understanding of their situation. This wasn't just about bullying or local intimidation anymore. Her father was right in the middle of a dangerous operation involving federal agencies and weapons traffickers. As darkness fell, Emma took Max out for his evening walk, staying within the immediate yard as her father had instructed. The fog had thickened as predicted, reducing visibility to mere feet beyond the porch lights. Max suddenly stiffened, his attention fixed on something in the swirling mist. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "Max? What is it?" Emma whispered, instinctively moving closer to the dog. The German shepherd's posture had shifted to full alert, his training evident in the way he positioned himself between Emma and the potential threat. Through the fog, Emma made out a shape moving slowly toward them, a human figure, deliberately keeping to the shadows at the edge of the light. Emma reached for her phone, ready to call for her father, when Max's demeanor suddenly changed. His ears pricked forward in recognition rather than threat. "It's all right," came a familiar voice from the mist. "He knows me." Ruth Whitaker emerged from the fog, moving with surprising agility for a woman of her age. Gone was the sweet, elderly demeanor she typically projected. In its place was something harder, more focused. "We need to talk," Ruth said without preamble. "Your father needs to know what's really happening." "Mrs. Whitaker?" Emma's confusion was evident in her voice. "How do you know Max?" The elderly woman smiled thinly. "Because I'm the one who recommended him for your father's unit 8 years ago. I was director of K-9 operations for Delta Force before I retired." She glanced toward the house. "But that's not why I'm here. The weapons coming tomorrow aren't just guns, Emma. They're chemical agents, and they're being brought in specifically for a demonstration to potential buyers." Emma felt her blood run cold. "What kind of demonstration?" "The kind that requires a remote, contained community as a test site." Ruth's expression was grim. "These people plan to use Eagle's Rest to showcase the effectiveness of their weapons. Everyone in town is in danger." As Ruth spoke, Max suddenly went rigid, his nose working the air currents. He turned toward the barn, hackles raised, a warning growl building in his throat. "What is it, boy?" Emma asked, alert to the dog's change in demeanor. "Chemical detection," Ruth said immediately. That was his specialty in Afghanistan. "If he's alerting now—" She didn't finish the sentence, but her implication was clear. "Dad," Emma called, turning toward the house. "Dad." James and Sheriff Anderson burst through the front door at her cry, both men instantly alert to the potential threat. James had his hand near his waistband, where Emma knew he kept a concealed weapon. "Ruth?" James's confusion at seeing the elderly woman in his yard quickly gave way to understanding as he noted Max's alert posture. "What's happening?" "There's already a chemical agent on your property," Ruth said urgently. "Max is detecting it, and there's more coming tomorrow, enough to devastate this entire town." The German shepherd had begun moving purposefully toward the barn, stopping occasionally to confirm the scent trail, his training taking over. James followed, signaling for Anderson to escort Emma and Ruth into the house. "What?" "Stay inside," he ordered. "Lock the doors and don't open them for anyone but me. Anderson, get your deputies out here, but quietly, no sirens, no lights." As James disappeared into the fog after Max, Ruth turned to Emma, her elderly facade completely dropped now, revealing the steel beneath. "Your father is going to need every bit of his training," she said grimly. "What's coming to Eagle's Rest isn't just a weapons shipment, it's the opening move in something much larger and more dangerous." "How do you know all this?" Emma asked, struggling to reconcile this version of Ruth with the sweet lady who sold jam at the farmer's market. Ruth's expression softened slightly. "Because, my dear, I've spent my entire life fighting people like the ones who are trying to take over our town." She reached into her purse and removed a small, worn photograph, passing it to Emma. "And because I have personal stakes in this fight." The photo showed a much younger Ruth Whitaker in military uniform, standing beside a tall, stern-looking man with familiar features. It took Emma a moment to recognize him, General Thomas Roberts, whose name she had seen in her father's research files. The man believed to be financing and directing the Storm Riders' weapons operation. "He's my son," Ruth said quietly, "and stopping him is my responsibility." Dawn broke over Eagle's Rest with a blood-red sky, the old weather adage, red sky in morning, Sailor's take warning weighing heavily on Emma's mind as she prepared for school. The previous night had unfolded in a series of revelations and urgent planning after Max detected chemical agents in a sealed container hidden in the Cooper barn. Sheriff Anderson had secured the container with proper hazardous materials protocols, while James and Ruth strategized late into the night. Their combined military expertise focused on preventing the larger shipment scheduled to arrive that evening. "I'm not sure you should go to school today," James said as Emma fed Max his breakfast, "after what we discovered last night." "That's exactly why I should go," Emma countered, her voice steadier than she felt. "If I suddenly disappear from school the day of their shipment, it'll raise suspicions. Besides, Justin might reveal something useful if he thinks everything's proceeding as planned." James studied his daughter, noting the determination that so resembled her mother's. "You're right," he conceded finally. "But Max stays with you every second, and you maintain communication checks every hour. One hint of trouble, and you call immediately." "Mom." Emma nodded, grateful for her father's respect for her decision. In the past week, their relationship had transformed, no longer simply father and daughter, but partners in a mission that carried life or death stakes. Ruth Whitaker had departed before sunrise, returning to her home to maintain appearances while activating what she called her network, a group of retired military personnel living quietly in Eagle's Rest who had been monitoring the Storm Riders since their arrival. The revelation that the town contained numerous former Special Operations members had surprised even James, whose careful background research had missed these deliberately concealed histories. The morning proceeded according to plan. James drove Emma to school, maintaining casual conversation for any listening devices that might remain active in his vehicle. Emma entered the building with Max at her side, her outward demeanor betraying none of the anxiety churning inside her. The German Shepherd remained on high alert, his training evident in his constant surveillance of their surroundings. Third period brought the first disruption to their carefully constructed routine. Emma had just settled into her seat in Ms. Martinez's math class when the classroom door opened to admit Principal Dawson. "Ms. Cooper," he said, his expression professionally neutral, "please gather your things. Your presence is required in my office." Emma felt her pulse quicken but maintained her composure as she collected her backpack, Max rising smoothly beside her. "The dog stays here," Principal Dawson added, holding up a hand as Emma and Max approached. "I'm sorry, sir, but Max is required to stay with me at all times," Emma replied, reciting the accommodation language her father had prepared. "The documentation you approved specifically states." "This is a disciplinary matter," Dawson interrupted, his tone hardening. "The animal is not permitted in my office during such proceedings." Emma hesitated, noting Ms. Martinez's sudden attention to their exchange. The teacher had risen from her desk, moving casually toward the classroom door. "What is the disciplinary issue, Robert?" Ms. Martinez asked, using the principal's first name with surprising familiarity. Dawson's expression flickered with annoyance. "That's not your concern, Ms. Martinez. This is an administrative matter. As Emma's teacher and advocate, I believe it is my concern." Ms. Martinez positioned herself subtly between Emma and the principal, especially when it involves disrupting accommodations established for a student's documented medical needs. The standoff continued for several tense seconds before Dawson's radio crackled to life. "Sir, we have the situation under control," came a voice that Emma recognized as belonging to the school security guard. "Package secured." Dawson pressed the transmit button. "And the father?" No sign. Proceeding with phase 2. A chill ran through Emma as understanding dawned. This wasn't about discipline, it was a coordinated attempt to separate her from Max and lure her away from the classroom. Ms. Martinez seemed to reach the same conclusion simultaneously, her hand moving to Emma's shoulder in a protective gesture. "Emma isn't going anywhere," the teacher stated firmly. "And if you persist, I'll be forced to contact Sheriff Anderson directly." Dawson's mask of professional concern slipped entirely, revealing cold calculation beneath. Always the hero, Lena. Should have known you weren't really here to teach algebra. His hand moved toward his jacket pocket. Max reacted before anyone else could move, lunging forward with a warning bark that sent Dawson stumbling backward. The principal recovered his balance quickly, but not before MS. Martinez had positioned Emma behind her and drawn a concealed weapon from beneath her cardigan. "Federal agent," she announced calmly. "Hands where I can see them, Principal Dawson." The classroom erupted in gasps and exclamations as students registered what was happening. MS Martinez never took her eyes off Dawson as she addressed the room. "Everyone remain calm and stay in your seats. This is a law enforcement matter." Dawson's expression twisted with contempt. "You've miscalculated, Agent Martinez. We've already secured what we need." Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket. Keeping her movements slow and careful, she checked the screen while remaining behind MS Martinez. The message from her father sent ice through her veins. "Trap. Do not leave building. Storm Riders have Max's scent item." Understanding slammed into Emma like a physical blow. The package Dawson's security team had secured wasn't a thing. It was Max's training scent pad, the specially prepared cloth that James used during the dog's refresher training. With it, the Storm Riders could confuse Max's chemical detection abilities, or worse, plant false trails to lure them into an ambush. Before Emma could process this realization, the classroom windows shattered inward as smoke grenades bounced across the floor, immediately filling the room with thick, acrid smoke. Students screamed and rushed for the door, creating chaotic cover for the black-clad figures who swung through the broken windows. "Emma, run!" MS Martinez shouted, firing 2 precise shots that dropped the first intruder. Max positioned himself between Emma and the attackers, his training manifesting in aggressive protection rather than retreat. The dog launched himself at a second intruder, powerful jaws clamping around the man's arm with bone-crushing force. Emma backed toward the classroom door, choking on smoke and disoriented by the chaos. Through the haze, she saw MS Martinez engaged in hand-to-hand combat with a third attacker, her movements betraying extensive combat training. But Dawson had disappeared, and more black-clad figures were entering through the windows. "Max," Emma called desperately, trying to locate her protector in the smoke-filled classroom. A sharp pain exploded at the base of her skull, and Emma felt her knees buckle as consciousness began to fade. Strong hands gripped her arms, dragging her backward through the doorway. Her last vision before blackness claimed her was of Max breaking free from his attacker and charging toward her, only to be met with a precisely aimed taser shot that sent the loyal dog crashing to the floor, body convulsing from the electrical current. "No," Emma whispered as consciousness slipped away. "Max." James Cooper was across town when the attack on the school began. He had been meeting with Sheriff Anderson and Ruth Whitaker at the sheriff's office, finalizing plans to intercept the weapons shipment, when the first reports of an active incident at Eagles Rest Middle School crackled over the police radio. He was already moving toward the door when his phone chimed with an automated alert from Emma's tracking device. The small locator he had concealed in her jacket was registering pattern. Rapid movement away from the school, traveling at vehicle speed. "They've taken her," he said, his voice deadly calm despite the fear gripping his heart. "The Storm Riders have Emma." Sheriff Anderson immediately mobilized his limited deputies, calling in mutual aid from neighboring counties and but James knew with cold certainty that official response would be too slow. The Storm Riders had planned this operation with military precision, and Emma was now their leverage against whatever they believed James knew about their weapons operation. Ruth Whitaker's face had gone ashen at the news. "This is Thomas's method," she said quietly. "He always targets the most vulnerable connection. We used to call it his pressure point strategy during operations." "Can you contact him?" James asked, already calculating pursuit routes based on the tracker's movement. Ruth shook her head. "Not directly. We haven't spoken in 15 years, not since he was forced out of the military for his increasingly extreme views on privatized warfare." "Then we do this my way," James replied, checking his concealed weapon. Anderson, coordinate the official response. Ruth, activate your network. I'm going after my daughter. You can't take on the entire Storm Riders compound alone, Anderson protested. Watch me, James said simply, and the cold precision in his voice made both Anderson and Ruth step back involuntarily. The friendly farmer facade had completely vanished, replaced by the Delta Force commander who had led some of the military's most dangerous operations. They've hurt my daughter and taken her from me, James continued, his voice terrifyingly controlled. They've injured Max, who is family to us. They've threatened my town. His eyes held a focus that bordered on predatory. Now they're going to learn why targeting a child is the worst mistake they could possibly make. As James left the sheriff's office, his phone chimed with another alert. Emma's tracker had stopped moving. The Storm Riders had reached their destination. James checked the coordinates and recognized them immediately: the abandoned gristmill on the edge of town, a remote location with multiple access routes and excellent defensive positioning. They had chosen their ground well, but they had made one critical miscalculation. They had taken his daughter, and now nothing would stop James Cooper from coming for them. Consciousness returned to Emma slowly, her head throbbing with each heartbeat. She kept her eyes closed initially, a technique her father had taught her: assess your surroundings before revealing you're awake. The surface beneath her was hard and cold, concrete most likely. The air smelled of mildew and old grain, confirming her suspicion that she was in the abandoned gristmill. Distant voices echoed through the cavernous space, their words indistinct but their tone clear: anger, urgency, disagreement. Emma's hands were bound in front of her with plastic zip ties, tight enough to secure but not cutting off circulation. Her captors had been professional but not cruel, an important distinction her father had emphasized during their discussions of tactical scenarios. She slowly tested her bonds, careful not to make any noise that would alert her captors to her conscious state. "I know you're awake," came a voice from nearby. Your breathing pattern changed. No point pretending. Emma opened her eyes to find Justin Kingston sitting on an overturned bucket about 10 feet away, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Gone was the swaggering bully from school, replaced by someone who looked uncomfortable and conflicted. "And where am I?" Emma asked, maintaining the pretense of disorientation despite having already identified her location. "The old mill," Justin replied. "My dad's using it as a staging area for tonight's operation." He shifted uneasily. "This wasn't supposed to happen, you know. You weren't supposed to get hurt." Emma carefully pushed herself into a sitting position, wincing at the pain in her head. "What was supposed to happen, Justin? Was terrifying me at school part of the plan? Making me feel worthless because of my weight? Pushing me to the point where I almost jumped off a roof?" Guilt flashed across the boy's face. "That wasn't, I was just supposed to watch you, report what your dad was doing. The other stuff," he looked down at his hands, "that was me being a jerk. I'm sorry." The apology caught Emma off guard. She studied Justin more carefully, noting details she'd previously missed: the faded bruise near his left eye, the way he flinched at sudden movements, the constant nervous glance toward the door. "Your dad hits you, doesn't he?" she asked quietly. Justin's head snapped up, eyes wide with surprise before narrowing defensively. "You don't know anything about my family." "I know what it looks like when someone's afraid in their own home," Emma countered. "I've seen kids at school with those same lookout behaviors. Always watching for the next threat, always trying to predict the mood shifts." Justin stared at her for a long moment before his shoulders sagged slightly. "It started after my mom left last year. He drinks and then he needs someone to blame." His voice dropped to barely audible. "You think I'm overweight? You should have seen me before. I lost 30 pounds in 2 months after we moved here. Couldn't keep anything down from the stress." Emma felt an unexpected wave of empathy for her tormentor. Behind his cruelty lay another damaged child, one using bullying as a displacement for his own powerlessness. "Help me," she said, holding out her bound wrists. Whatever your dad and his friends are planning, it's worse than you know. They have chemical weapons, Justin. They're going to hurt people, maybe everyone in Eagle's Rest. Justin's face paled. What? No, they're just moving guns. Or regular weapons. That's what my dad said. They lied to you, Emma insisted. My dog is trained to detect chemical agents, and he found them on our property. Your dad's boss, General Roberts, is planning to demonstrate these weapons, maybe even in town. She could see doubt and fear warring on Justin's face. Why should I believe you? Because I've never lied to you, Emma replied simply. I've avoided you, I've been afraid of you, but I've never lied. Can you say the same about your dad? The question hung in the air between them. Justin glanced toward the door, where the voices of the adults had grown more heated. If I help you, my dad will kill me, he whispered. Literally kill me. If you don't help me, a lot more people might die, Emma countered, including your friends from school. Justin closed his eyes briefly, his internal struggle evident. When he opened them again, determination had replaced the fear. I can't untie you, they'll check periodically. But I can tell you what I know. He moved closer, lowering his voice further. The shipment arrives at 7 tonight. It's coming by truck disguised as agricultural chemicals. My dad's boss is bringing in some foreign buyers to watch the demonstration. What kind of demonstration? Emma pressed. I don't know exactly, Justin admitted. But I overheard my dad talking about a controlled population sample and measurable effects. They picked Eagle's Rest because it's isolated enough that they can control access completely during the demonstration. Emma felt sick. They're planning to use the town as a test site. Justin nodded miserably. I think so. But I didn't know about any chemicals, I swear. I thought it was just guns. My father will come for me, Emma said with absolute certainty. And when he does, it's going to get dangerous for everyone here. Is there somewhere you can go to be safe? There's a storage room in the basement level, Justin replied. Old grain chutes, I hide there sometimes when my dad's on a rampage. Go there when you see the first sign of trouble, Emma advised. And Justin, thank you for telling me the truth. The boy nodded awkwardly, unused to civil conversation with his former victim. I'll try to come back, maybe bring you some water or something. After Justin slipped away, Emma began working systematically on her bindings. Her father had taught her multiple escape techniques during their week of preparation, demonstrating how to position zip ties to maximize breaking potential. Her stocky build, so often a source of shame, now provided the strength needed to apply consistent pressure to the restraints. Outside the small storage room where she was being held, the argument among the storm riders had escalated. Emma caught fragments of heated exchange. Can't keep her here. Cooper will come looking. Perfect leverage. It wasn't part of the plan. The plans change, Sledge. The demonstration requires. The zip tie finally gave way with a satisfying snap, and Emma quickly rubbed her wrists to restore circulation. She examined her surroundings more thoroughly now, a small maintenance room with a single door and a narrow ventilation window too small for escape. The door was likely guarded, making that route untenable. But the room contained maintenance supplies, including cleaning chemicals and tools. Emma's mind worked quickly, recalling everything her father had taught her about improvisation in hostile situations. Use what's available, he'd instructed. Everything is a potential resource. She began gathering supplies, forming a plan not just for escape but for disruption. If she could create enough chaos, it might buy time for her father to arrive, or better yet, provide an opportunity to warn the town about the impending demonstration. As she worked, a commotion outside caught her attention. The argument had given way to urgent commands and rapid movement. Through the small window, Emma glimpsed storm riders taking defensive positions, weapons drawn. He's here, she whispered to herself, a mixture of relief and fear washing through her. Her father had arrived precisely as she'd known he would. What happened next defied Emma's expectations. Instead of the frontal assault she had anticipated, there came a calm, authoritative female voice over what sounded like a megaphone. "This is Federal Agent Elena Martinez. The building is surrounded by ATF tactical teams. Surrender your weapons and release the hostage immediately." Emma's jaw dropped in surprise. MS. Martinez wasn't alone in the rescue operation. Before she could process this development, another voice joined the standoff, one that sent chills down her spine despite its familiar tone. "This is Ruth Whitaker," came the elderly woman's voice, somehow carrying the command presence of someone half her age. "Thomas, I know you're in there. This has gone far enough. Come out and face me directly, son." The building fell eerily silent for several heartbeats. Then a new voice responded, cultured and cold. "Mother, always turning up at the most inopportune moments." General Roberts had entered the standoff. "I assume Cooper is with you? The girl's father?" "I'm here, Roberts." The sound of her father's voice filled Emma with hope. "Release my daughter, and we can discuss terms." "Terms?" Roberts laughed, the sound echoing through the mill's cavernous spaces. "You misunderstand the situation entirely. This isn't a negotiation, it's a demonstration. And it's already begun." As if on cue, Emma heard a distinct hissing sound from multiple locations throughout the building. Her blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. Roberts was releasing the chemical agents inside the mill, using the standoff itself as the demonstration for his buyers. And then, cutting through her fear like a beacon of hope, came a sound she had thought she might never hear again, the distinctive bark of a German shepherd, followed by scratching at her door. Somehow, against all odds, Max had found her. Emma's heart leapt at Max's familiar bark. After confirming the door was unlocked from her side, she carefully turned the handle, opening it just enough for the German shepherd to slip through. Max entered with military precision, immediately performing a quick sweep of the small room before returning to Emma, and his injuries from the school attack evident in his slightly favored left side, but clearly not debilitating. "Max, how did you?" Emma whispered, burying her face briefly in the dog's thick fur before focusing on the task at hand. Tied to Max's collar was a small pouch containing an emergency gas mask and a note in her father's handwriting, "Chemical release imminent." "Mask on. Follow Max out. Trust Martinez." The methodical training sessions with Max over the past week suddenly made perfect sense. Her father had prepared for this scenario specifically, training the dog to find her and deliver critical equipment if they were separated. Emma quickly secured the mask over her face, the specialized design accommodating her broader facial structure perfectly, another example of her father's meticulous planning. "Okay, Max, get us out," she whispered through the mask. Outside the maintenance room, chaos had erupted. The hissing sound of released chemical agents had grown louder, and Emma could hear shouting, coughing, and the distinctive sound of federal agents breaching the building. Max led her not toward the main entrance where the standoff continued, but toward a back section of the mill, moving with confidence through the confusing layout. They encountered their first storm rider at a junction between two corridors. The man was focused on securing a door, his back to him. Max immediately switched from guide to protector, the change in his posture alerting Emma to stop and remain silent. When the man turned and spotted them, Max launched forward with precision, taking the surprised biker down at the knees without a sound, applying just enough pressure to incapacitate without causing serious injury, exactly as he'd been trained. "But good boy," Emma whispered as they continued past the downed man. Max guided her through a series of turns, avoiding the main areas where the confrontation between federal agents and storm riders was intensifying. They were nearing what appeared to be a rear exit when a familiar figure stumbled into their path. Justin Kingston, eyes red and streaming from the chemical irritants, clearly disoriented. Emma hesitated only briefly before grabbing Justin's arm. "Come with us," she ordered through her mask. "Max knows the way out." The boy nodded weakly, too overcome to argue. Emma positioned him behind her, creating a human chain as Max continued leading them toward safety. They passed through a small processing room with ancient machinery, then down a short corridor that ended at a metal door. Max scratched at the door, indicating this was their exit. Emma pushed it open cautiously, revealing the wooded area behind the mill. Standing just outside was M.S. Martinez, or rather Agent Martinez, outfitted in tactical gear with her weapon drawn. Emma. The federal agent's professional demeanor broke momentarily with relief. "In Kingston's boy. Good work." She ushered them away from the building toward a secure perimeter where medical personnel waited. "Your father will be glad to see you're safe." "Where is he?" Emma asked urgently, scanning the perimeter for James. Martinez's expression tightened. "He went in after you with Ruth Whitaker." They were focused on reaching General Roberts before he could deploy the full chemical payload. "My dad's in there?" Justin interjected, his voice cracking with fear despite his tough facade. Along with 23 other storm riders and 12 federal agents, Martinez confirmed grimly. "The situation is fluid." A medic approached to examine Emma and Justin, but Emma shook her head. "I'm fine. Max needs medical attention first." She pointed to the dog's injuries from the school attack. As a veterinary medic was summoned for Max, Emma turned back toward the mill, her concern for her father overwhelming. The chemical agents Roberts had released appeared designed more for incapacitation than lethality, likely a demonstration of less lethal chemical weapons for his buyers, but the danger remained significant, especially with armed confrontations occurring inside. "I need to help," Emma insisted to Martinez. "The best help you can provide is staying safe," the agent replied firmly. "Your father risked everything to find you. Don't nullify that sacrifice by putting yourself back in danger." Emma reluctantly allowed herself to be led to the medical staging area, but her eyes never left the building. Max stayed by her side, receiving treatment for his injuries while maintaining his protective vigil. 30 agonizing minutes passed with sporadic gunfire and shouted commands emanating from the mill. Then, suddenly, the building's main doors burst open. Federal agents emerged in protective gear, escorting handcuffed storm riders to waiting vehicles. Emma scanned each group desperately for signs of her father. Finally, 3 figures emerged from a side entrance, James Cooper supporting Ruth Whitaker on one side, and between them, a handcuffed man in expensive civilian clothes, General Thomas Roberts, his military bearing evident despite his restraints. Emma broke away from the medical area, running toward her father with Max limping determinedly beside her. James handed Roberts to nearby federal agents and opened his arms just in time to catch Emma in a fierce embrace. "You came for me," Emma whispered, clinging to her father. "Always," James replied simply, his voice rough with emotion. "Always, Emmy Bear." Ruth Whitaker stood nearby, watching her son being led to a secure transport vehicle. Her expression held the complex mixture of grief and resolution that comes from doing what is right, despite personal cost. "I'm sorry it came to this, Thomas," she called to him. "But I couldn't let you harm these people." Roberts turned to face his mother, his expression coldly composed. "You chose strangers over family. Again." "No," Ruth corrected firmly. "I chose what's right over what's wrong. As I taught you to do once upon a time." As Roberts was driven away, Sheriff Anderson approached their group, looking exhausted but determined. "It's over," he confirmed. "We've apprehended all Storm Riders members and secured their weapons cache. The chemical agents have been contained by hazmat specialists." He nodded respectfully to James. "Couldn't have done it without you, Cooper." "Or without Emma," James added, his arm still around his daughter's shoulders. "She kept her head in a crisis and helped save that Kingston boy." The following days brought significant changes to Eagle's Rest. Federal agencies descended on the town, processing evidence and debriefing witnesses. The Storm Riders compound yielded a treasure trove of intelligence about weapons trafficking networks, leading to arrests across 5 states. Principal Dawson was revealed to be a former military contractor working for General Roberts, tasked with monitoring the town's children for leverage opportunities. Justin Kingston and 5 other Storm Riders' children were placed in protective custody pending family court hearings. To everyone's surprise, Emma visited Justin during this time, bringing books and offering a friendship born from mutual understanding of trauma. Their shared experience had created an unlikely bond, transcending their former adversarial relationship. 1 week after the incident at the gristmill, the Cooper farm hosted an unusual gathering. Sheriff Anderson, Agent Martinez, Ruth Whitaker, and several of Ruth's network of retired military personnel sat around the dinner table as Emma and James served a home-cooked meal. Max moved between guests, accepting affectionate pats and offering his own brand of canine comfort. To Eagle's Rest, Sheriff Anderson proposed a toast, a town that proved stronger than anyone expected. And to unexpected heroes, Ruth added, raising her glass toward Emma. Sometimes the strongest warriors aren't the ones with the most obvious strength. Emma blushed at the attention but accepted the acknowledgement with growing confidence. The events of the past weeks had transformed her, not by changing her physical appearance but by revealing her inner strength and resilience. As the evening progressed, Emma slipped away to the porch, seeking a moment of quiet reflection. Her father joined her shortly, sitting beside her on the steps. "Penny for your thoughts," he offered, bumping her shoulder gently with his. Emma leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I was just thinking about Mom, about what she would say if she could see us now." James smiled, his eyes reflecting both sadness and pride. "She'd say her daughter is the perfect combination of her parents, your mother's heart and your father's strength." "I'm still fat," Emma observed, but the statement held none of the self-loathing that had previously accompanied such acknowledgments. "You're built exactly as you're meant to be," James replied firmly. "Strong enough to endure, sturdy enough to stand your ground. Your body isn't a flaw, Emmy, it's part of what helped you survive." As darkness settled over the farm, Max joined them on the porch, lying across both their feet in his customary protective position. Together, the unlikely family unit gazed at the emerging stars, scarred but unbroken, finally at peace in their quiet corner of Eagle's Rest. In Emma's journey, we witnessed the enduring power of family bonds that many of us hold dear. Like Emma, we all face moments when the world seems to judge us by our appearance rather than our character. Her story reminds us that true strength isn't measured by physical prowess, but by resilience in the face of cruelty and courage when confronting fear. As we age, we understand that the body changes, but our worth never diminishes. Emma learned that her size wasn't a weakness but provided strength when she needed it most. Similarly, our supposed limitations often become our greatest assets in life's crucial moments. The relationship between James and Emma reflects what many of us know deeply, that protecting our loved ones transcends all other priorities. Their partnership reminds us that respect flows both ways between generations. Wisdom pairs powerfully with fresh perspective. In our twilight years, Emma's story reassures us that what matters isn't how others perceive us, but the integrity with which we face life's challenges and the love we share with those who truly see us. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.